Ethan's boots crunched against the frost-covered gravel as he stood outside the church, the distant organ music clawing at his chest. He could still hear his mother's voice, sharp as a blade, calling him selfish, a traitor to the family, for refusing to step inside. But how could he celebrate his brother's wedding when every pew inside that building was a reminder of the love he was forced to hide? In the small town of Willow Creek, Pennsylvania, where everyone knew your name and your secrets, Ethan Harper had spent years burying who he was. At 32, he was the quiet mechanic who fixed your car with a nod and a half-smile. The guy who never caused trouble. But trouble found him the day he met Lucas Bennett, the new history teacher at Willow Creek High, whose laugh could light up a room and whose eyes saw right through Ethan's carefully built walls. Their love had grown in stolen moments, late-night drives, whispered confessions in the woods, secret kisses behind the auto shop, because in Willow Creek, love like theirs was a sin whispered about in church basements. Now, as Ethan stood frozen in the November chill, his phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "I'm with you. Always." Those words were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the weight of his family's judgment. His younger brother, Caleb, was getting married inside that church to Sarah, his high school sweetheart, in a ceremony that screamed small-town perfection. Ethan was supposed to be the best man, but he'd walked away from the rehearsal dinner last night, unable to stomach another lecture from his father about family values. The whole town was buzzing Ethan Harper, the selfish one, ditching his own brother's wedding. But they didn't know the half of it. Ethan shoved his hands into his jacket pockets, his breath visible in the air. He wasn't here to make a scene. He'd come to see Lucas, who was waiting in their usual spot by the river, far from the church's stained glass judgment. The riverbank was their sanctuary, a place where the world's rules didn't apply, where they could dream of a life beyond Willow Creek. But today, Lucas had sounded different on the phone, urgent, almost desperate. "We need to talk," he'd said, and Ethan's stomach had twisted with a fear he couldn't name. As he walked toward the river, the town's whispers seemed to follow him. Willow Creek was a place where tradition was law, where the church steeple cast a long shadow over every decision. Ethan had grown up in its grip, raised by parents who quoted scripture at breakfast and expected their sons to follow a straight and narrow path. Caleb had always been the golden child, the one who played football, dated the right girls, and never questioned the rules. Ethan, though, was different. He'd known it since he was 12, when he'd felt his heart race watching a boy in his class instead of the cheerleaders. He'd buried that truth for years, terrified of what it would cost him. Lucas had changed everything. They'd met a year ago at the town's annual fair, where Lucas, new to Willow Creek, had been roped into judging the pie contest. Ethan had been there fixing a broken carnival ride, grease on his hands and skepticism in his eyes. Lucas had wandered over, offered him a slice of pecan pie, and said, "You look like you could use a break." That simple act of kindness had cracked something open in Ethan, and soon, their chance encounters turned into late-night talks, then stolen kisses, then love so fierce it scared him. Lucas was everything Willow Creek wasn't open. Fearless, unapologetic. But even Lucas couldn't shield them from the town's prying eyes. By the time Ethan reached the river, the sun was dipping low, painting the water gold. Lucas sat on their bench, his dark hair catching the light, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Ethan's heart sank. Lucas was usually the one to smile first, to pull Ethan into a hug that made the world feel safe. But today, his face was shadowed, his jaw tight. "Ethan," he said, standing as Ethan approached. "I need to tell you something." Ethan stopped, his boots sinking into the soft earth. "What's wrong?" His voice was rough, braced for impact. Lucas stepped closer, his eyes searching Ethan's face as if memorizing it. "It's about Caleb's wedding," he said, "and why you couldn't be there." Ethan's chest tightened. He'd told Lucas bits and pieces how his parents had cornered him after the engagement party, demanding he keep his lifestyle out of Caleb's big day. How Caleb had stayed silent, refusing to meet Ethan's eyes. But there was more. Something Ethan hadn't shared. Something that burned like acid in his throat. And now, looking at Lucas's face, he wondered if the truth was about to unravel everything. Lucas's words hung in the air, heavy as the November mist rolling off the river. Ethan wanted to run, to drown out whatever Lucas was about to say. But his feet stayed rooted. "What do you mean? About the wedding?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lucas took a deep breath, his eyes flickering with something Ethan couldn't read: anger, maybe, or fear. "I overheard something last night," Lucas said. "At the diner, after you left the rehearsal dinner. Your brother, Caleb, said something to Sarah's brother, Mike. They didn't know I was there." Ethan's stomach churned. Mike was the kind of guy who wore his prejudice like a badge, always quick with a Bible verse or a sneer. "What did he say?" Ethan asked, dreading the answer. Lucas hesitated, then reached for Ethan's hand, his grip firm. "Caleb told Mike he didn't want you at the wedding. Not as best man, not even as a guest. He said it was because of us, because of who you are." The words hit Ethan like a punch, stealing his breath. He'd known Caleb was uncomfortable, had felt the distance growing between them since he'd come out 6 months ago. But to hear that his own brother had banned him from the wedding, that Caleb had chosen shame over family, was a betrayal that cut deeper than Ethan had ever imagined. "He said that." Ethan's voice cracked, his eyes burning. "My own brother." Lucas nodded, his face etched with pain. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I wanted to tell you last night, but you were already so hurt. I didn't know how to say it without breaking you." Ethan pulled his hand away, turning to face the river so Lucas wouldn't see the tears threatening to spill. He'd spent his whole life protecting Caleb, teaching him how to ride a bike, covering for him when he snuck out as a teenager, even taking the blame for things Caleb had done. And now, this. "I thought he just didn't want a scene," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "I thought if I stayed away, it'd be easier for everyone." "It's not about you," Lucas said fiercely, stepping closer. "It's about them. Their fear, their ignorance. You don't owe them your silence, Ethan. You don't owe them anything." But Ethan wasn't so sure. Growing up in Willow Creek had taught him to keep his head down, to swallow his pain. His parents had made it clear being gay was a choice, a sin, something to be fixed. When Ethan had finally told them about Lucas, His mother had cried, and his father had quoted Leviticus, his voice cold as stone. Caleb had been there, too, sitting at the kitchen table, saying nothing. Ethan had hoped his brother would come around, that love would outweigh dogma. But now, that hope felt like a lie. I can't just let this go, Ethan said, turning back to Lucas. He's my brother. I need to talk to him. Lucas's eyes softened, but there was a warning in them. Ethan. He made his choice. And it's not just Caleb. Sarah's family, the ones pushing this. Mike was bragging about how they'd keep the wedding pure. It's bigger than just your brother. Ethan's fists clenched. Sarah's family, the Millers, were pillars of Willow Creek's church community, their influence woven into every sermon and town hall meeting. If they were behind this, it meant Ethan wasn't just fighting his family, was up against the whole town's moral machinery. What am I supposed to do? He asked, his voice raw. Just walk away. Pretend it doesn't hurt. Lucas stepped closer, his hand brushing Ethan's cheek. You fight, he said. Not with fists. Not with shouting. You fight by being you. By loving me. By showing them they can't erase us. Ethan wanted to believe him, but the weight of Willow Creek's judgment was crushing. He thought of the church, of his mother's tears, of Caleb's silence. And then he thought of Lucas, the man who'd taught him what it meant to feel alive, to want a future. I don't know if I'm strong enough, Ethan admitted. You are, Lucas said, his voice steady. And I'm not going anywhere. That night, Ethan lay awake in their small apartment above the auto shop, Lucas asleep beside him. The town was quiet, but Ethan's mind was a storm. He thought of confronting Caleb, of demanding answers, but every scenario ended in more pain. He thought of leaving Willow Creek, starting over somewhere new, but the idea of running felt like surrender. By dawn, he'd made a decision. He'd go to the wedding reception. Not to fight, but to show Caleb and everyone else that he wasn't ashamed. He'd bring Lucas, and they'd face the town together. The reception was held at the Willow Creek Community Center, a sprawling hall decorated with fairy lights and white roses. Ethan and Lucas arrived late, hand in hand, their presence drawing gasps and whispers from the crowd. Caleb stood near the dance floor, his face paling as he saw them. Sarah's family was there, too, their eyes narrowing. Ethan's heart pounded, but Lucas's grip kept him steady. Ethan, Caleb said, approaching them, his voice low. What are you doing here? I'm your brother, Ethan said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his chest. I deserve to be here. Caleb's eyes darted to Lucas, then back to Ethan. This isn't the place, he said, his tone pleading. Please, just go. Before Ethan could respond, Mike stepped forward, his face twisted with disgust. You heard him, Mike said. This is a family event. Take your friend and leave. The room seemed to close in, the whispers growing louder. Ethan felt the weight of every stare, every judgment. But then Lucas spoke, his voice clear and unwavering. We're not going anywhere, he said. Ethan's family, too. And so am I. The air in the community center crackled with tension. The fairy lights casting a soft glow that did nothing to warm the cold stares directed at Ethan and Lucas. Mike's words hung like a challenge. And for a moment, Ethan felt the old urge to shrink, to disappear. But Lucas's hand in his was an anchor, grounding him in a courage he hadn't known he possessed. I'm not here to ruin your day, Caleb, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the knot in his throat. But I'm done hiding. I'm done letting you pretend I don't exist. Caleb's face twisted, caught between shame and defiance. This isn't about you, Ethan, he said, his voice low. It's my wedding. Why can't you just let it go? Let it go? Ethan's voice rose, drawing more eyes. You're the one who told me to stay away. You're the one who let them, he gestured toward Mike and the cluster of Sarah's family, decide who I am. Sarah appeared at Caleb's side, her white dress glowing under the lights, her expression a mix of confusion and concern. What's going on? She asked, looking between Caleb and Ethan. Caleb, what's he talking about? Caleb opened his mouth, but no words came. Ethan saw the guilt in his brother's eyes, the same guilt he'd seen when they were kids and Caleb had broken something and let Ethan take the blame. But this wasn't a broken vase or a missed curfew. This was Ethan's life. Tell her, Ethan said, his voice quieter now, but no less firm. Tell her what you said to Mike. Tell her why I wasn't at the church today. The crowd parted slightly, forming a loose circle around them. Ethan felt Lucas's thumb brush against his knuckles, a silent reminder of his strength. Caleb's face flushed red, his hands clenching at his sides. Ethan, don't do this, he said. Not here. Then when? Ethan shot back. When's a good time to talk about how you're ashamed of me? How you let your in-laws dictate who gets to be your family? Sarah's eyes widened, her gaze snapping to Caleb. Is that true? She asked, her voice trembling. Did you tell Ethan not to come? Caleb's silence was answer enough. Sarah's face fell, and she took a step back, her hand clutching the edge of her veil. Caleb, how could you? She whispered. He's your brother. Mike stepped forward again, his voice booming. This is a house of God's people, he said, addressing the crowd more than Ethan. We don't need this kind of disruption at a sacred event. Lucas laughed, sharp and unafraid. Sacred, he said. You're standing here judging a man for loving someone, and you call that sacred. Maybe you need to reread your Bible. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some nodding, others glaring. Ethan felt a spark of hope there were people here, maybe just a few, who didn't agree with Mike. But before anyone could speak, Ethan's mother, Diane, pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of anguish. Ethan, please, she said, her voice breaking. You're tearing this family apart. The words stung, but Ethan held his ground. I'm not the one tearing us apart. Mom, he said. You are. You and Dad and Caleb the ones who made me choose between my family and my truth. Diane's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. Ethan's father, standing a few feet away, remained silent, his face unreadable. The weight of their rejection was a physical thing, pressing against Ethan's chest. But Lucas's presence kept him from breaking. Let's go, Lucas said softly, tugging Ethan's hand. You said what you needed to say? But Ethan wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. He turned to Caleb, his voice low but clear. I love you, Caleb. I always will. But I won't let you make me feel like I'm less than you because of who I love. Caleb's eyes met Ethan's for the first time that night. And for a moment, Ethan saw the boy he'd grown up with, the one who'd looked up to him, who'd trusted him. But then Caleb looked away, and the moment was gone. Ethan and Lucas left the hall, the whispers following them into the night. Outside, the air was sharp, the stars bright against the dark sky. Ethan's hands shook as he lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around him like a shield. I don't know if I did the right thing, he said, his voice barely audible. Lucas wrapped an arm around him, pulling him close. You stood up for yourself, he said. That's always the right thing. They drove back to their apartment in silence, the weight of the night settling between them. Ethan replayed the scene in his head. Caleb's silence, Sarah's shock, his mother's tears. He wondered if he'd lost his family for good, if love was worth that price. But when Lucas reached for his hand, squeezing it gently, Ethan felt a flicker of certainty. This love, this man was worth everything. The next morning, Ethan woke to a knock at the door. He opened it to find Sarah standing there, still in a simple dress from the night before, her eyes red from crying. Can we talk? She asked. Ethan nodded, stepping aside to let her in. Lucas was in the kitchen, making coffee, but he gave them space, retreating to the bedroom with a reassuring nod. Sarah sat on the couch, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. I didn't know, she said finally. About what Caleb said to Mike. I didn't know he told you not to come. Ethan sat across from her, his heart heavy. Would it have changed anything? He asked. Sarah's eyes met his, raw and honest. I don't know, she admitted. But I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm so sorry. Sarah's apology hung in the air, fragile and incomplete. But it was the first crack in the wall Ethan had felt from his family in months. He wanted to believe her, to see her as separate from Caleb's betrayal. But the hurt was too raw. Why are you here, Sarah? He asked, his voice gentle but guarded. She looked down at her hands, still twisting her ring. I couldn't sleep last night, she said. After you and Lucas left, I kept thinking about what you said. About Caleb choosing who gets to be family. I don't want to be part of that. Ethan leaned back, studying her. Sarah had always been kind. The kind of person who baked cookies for neighbors and volunteered at the church's food drive. But kindness wasn't enough when it came to facing Willow Creek's deeply rooted prejudices. What does that mean? He asked. You're married to him now. You're part of his world. Sarah's eyes flickered with something like defiance. I love Caleb, she said. But I don't love what he did to you. I told him that last night. We really fought for the first time. He said he was just trying to keep the peace, to make everyone happy. But how is excluding you keeping the peace? Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to feel vindicated, but all he felt was a hollow ache. Did he say anything about me? About why he did it? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. He said he was scared. Scared of what people would say, what the Millers would think. He said he didn't want our wedding to be tainted by gossip. Tainted, Ethan repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. That's what I am to him. A taint. No, Sarah said quickly, leaning forward. That's not what he meant. Or, I don't think it is. He's confused. Ethan. He loves you. But he's caught in this town. In all its rules. He doesn't know how to stand up to them. Ethan wanted to argue, to say that love should be stronger than fear. But he knew it wasn't that simple. He'd spent years wrestling with the same fear, the same shame. What do you want from me, Sarah? He asked. Why tell me this? Because I want to make it right, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know how, but I want to try. I want you to be part of our lives. Ethan. You and Lucas. Ethan's throat burned. He wanted to believe her. But trust was a fragile thing, and his was in pieces. Before he could respond, Lucas emerged from the bedroom, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one in front of Sarah, his expression neutral but kind. You're welcome here, he said to her. But Ethan's been through enough. If you mean what you say, it's going to take more than words. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. I know, she said. I needed to start somewhere. After Sarah left, Ethan and Lucas sat in silence, the weight of her visit lingering. Lucas reached for Ethan's hand, his touch a quiet reassurance. What do you think? Lucas asked. I don't know, Ethan admitted. I want to believe her, but I'm tired of hoping for things that don't happen. Lucas nodded, his eyes soft. You don't have to decide anything now. Just know I'm here, whatever you choose. The next few days were a blur. Ethan threw himself into work at the auto shop, losing himself in the rhythm of engines and oil changes. But the town's whispers followed him, some sympathetic, others cruel. At the grocery store, Mrs. Henderson, the librarian, squeezed his arm and said, You did the right thing, standing up. But at the gas station, a group of men from the church muttered abomination under their breath as he passed. Then, on Wednesday, Caleb showed up at the shop. Ethan was under a car, wrench in hand, when he heard his brother's voice. Ethan, can we talk? Ethan slid out, wiping his hands on a rag, his heart racing. Caleb looked exhausted, his eyes shadowed, his wedding ring glinting in the fluorescent light. What do you want? Ethan asked, his voice guarded. I messed up, Caleb said, his voice low. I didn't know how to handle it, Mom and Dad. The Millers. The church. I thought keeping you away would make it easier. I was wrong. Ethan stared at him, searching for the sincerity behind the words. You think saying sorry fixes this? He asked. You chose them over me. Caleb. Your own brother. Caleb's face crumpled. I know, he said. I was a coward. I'm still a coward. But I don't want to lose you. Ethan. You're my brother. Ethan's hands shook, torn between anger and the love he still felt for Caleb. You don't get to just decide that now, he said. You hurt me. You hurt Lucas. You don't get to walk in here and make it okay. Caleb nodded, his eyes wet. I know, he said. But I'm here. I'm trying. Can you at least give me a chance? Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. Caleb left, and Ethan stood in the empty shop, the weight of his brother's words pressing against him. He didn't know if he could forgive, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, his family wasn't lost to him forever. The days after Caleb's visit were a tightrope walk for Ethan. He wanted to trust his brother's apology, to believe that love could mend what fear had broken, but doubt not at him. Willow Creek's judgment was a constant shadow, and every glance from a neighbor, every hushed conversation, reminded him how fragile his place in this town was. Lucas, as always, was his anchor. They spent evenings by the river, talking about everything and nothing, dreams of moving to a city where they could walk hand in hand without fear. Plans for a future that felt both impossible and necessary. Lucas had a way of making Ethan feel seen, not just as a man in love, but as someone worthy of it. You're enough, Lucas would say, his voice soft but certain, and Ethan clung to those words like a lifeline. But the town wasn't done with them. On Friday, Ethan found a note taped to the auto shop's door. Faggots don't belong here. The words were scrawled in black marker. The paper crumpled as if the writer had hesitated before leaving it. Ethan's hands shook as he tore it down, his anger warring with a bone-deep exhaustion. He didn't tell Lucas she couldn't bear to see the worry in his eyes, but the note burned a hole in his pocket, a reminder of the hatred they faced. That night, Ethan and Lucas attended a town hall meeting, not because they wanted to, but because Lucas insisted. We can't hide, he'd said. If we want things to change, we have to show up. The meeting was about a proposed community center renovation, but Ethan knew it would be a stage for the town's divisions. Sure enough, when they walked in, heads turned, and whispers followed. Mike Miller was there, standing at the front with the pastor, his eyes locking onto Ethan with a sneer. The discussion started innocently enough: budget concerns, paint colors, but it didn't take long for Mike to steer it toward community values. We need a center that reflects who we are, he said, his voice carrying over the crowd. A place for families, for faith, not for agendas that don't belong. Ethan's blood boiled, but Lucas squeezed his hand under the table. A silence, stay calm. Then, to Ethan's surprise, Mrs. Henderson, the librarian, stood up. "Mike, I've known you since you were a boy," she said, her voice steady. "And I've known Ethan just as long. He's as much a part of this town as you are. Maybe it's time we stop deciding who belongs and start listening to each other." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Not loud, but enough to make Mike's face redden. Ethan felt a spark of hope, but it was short-lived. Mike doubled down, quoting scripture, his words sharp and accusing. Lucas stood, his presence commanding the room. "You talk about faith," he said. "But where's the faith in turning away your neighbor? Ethan and I aren't your enemies. We're just trying to live. Same as you." The room erupted in murmurs. Some supportive, others hostile. Ethan's heart raced, but he stood beside Lucas, their shoulders touching. For the first time, he felt like they weren't alone. Not everyone in Willow Creek was against them. But the victory was bittersweet. Mike's allies were louder, and the pastor's silence spoke volumes. After the meeting, Ethan and Lucas walked home, the night air cool against their skin. "You were incredible," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how you do it." Lucas smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "I do it because I love you," he said, "and because I believe in us. But Ethan, I need to tell you something." Ethan stopped, his heart sinking. Lucas's tone was too serious, too heavy. "What is it?" he asked, bracing himself. Lucas took a deep breath, his eyes searching Ethan's. "I got an offer," he said. "A teaching job in Philadelphia. Better pay, better school. A place where we could be us." Ethan's mind reeled. Philadelphia was a world away from Willow Creek, a city where they could hold hands in public, where they wouldn't have to look over their shoulders. But it also meant leaving everything: his shop, his family, the only home he'd ever known. "When do you have to decide?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Next week," Lucas said. "I want us to decide together. But Ethan, I don't know how much longer I can stay here." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. He loved Lucas more than he'd ever thought possible. But the idea of leaving Willow Creek felt like abandoning a piece of himself. That night, they lay in bed, holding each other, the future a question neither could answer. The next morning, Ethan found another note at the shop. This one worse: "Leave or else." He didn't show it to Lucas, but the words haunted him. He thought of Caleb, of Sarah's apology, of the town's divided heart. And he thought of Lucas's offer: a chance at a new life. But at what cost? The second note was a weight Ethan carried alone, its threat echoing in his mind as he worked through the day. He didn't tell Lucas, not wanting to add to his burden. But the words "leave or else" felt like a clock ticking down. Willow Creek was no longer just a place of judgment. It was a place of danger. Lucas noticed Ethan's silence, though. Over dinner, he set down his fork and reached across the table. "Talk to me," he said. "You've been somewhere else all day." Ethan wanted to lie, to protect Lucas from the truth. But he couldn't. He pulled the note from his pocket and slid it across the table. Lucas's face darkened as he read it. his jaw tightening. "This is why we need to leave," he said, his voice low but urgent. "It's not just about the job, Ethan. It's about our safety." Ethan stared at the table, the grain of the wood blurring as his eyes burned. "This is my home," he said. "I built this Life Me shop. My customers. I can't just walk away because some coward leaves a note." Lucas leaned forward, his eyes fierce. "And I can't watch you get hurt," he said. "Not when there's a place where we can be free, where we don't have to hide." Ethan's heart ached at the thought of leaving. But Lucas's words stirred something in Hema, longing for a life where love didn't come with a price. "What if I can't do it?" he asked. "What if I can't leave Caleb, my parents, this town?" Lucas's expression softened, but there was pain in his eyes. "Then we'll figure it out," he said. "But I need you to be honest with me, Ethan. If you want to stay, I'll stay with you. But I need to know you're in this with me." Ethan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He was in it more than he'd ever been in anything, but the choice felt like tearing himself in two. That night, they made love with a desperation that spoke of fear and hope intertwined, their bodies saying what words couldn't. The next day, Ethan went to see Caleb. He found his brother at the hardware store, restocking shelves, his face drawn with fatigue. "We need to talk," Ethan said, his voice firm. Caleb set down a box of nails, his eyes wary. "I'm listening," he said. Ethan took a deep breath, the note burning in his pocket. "Someone's threatening me," he said. "Notes at the shop, telling me to leave town. I don't know who, but I know it's because of who I am. Because of Lucas." Caleb's face paled. "What?" "Ethan, that's not right. Do you know who's doing it?" "No," Ethan said. "But I know this town. I know the kind of people who think I'm a problem to be solved. And I know you didn't help when you pushed me out of your wedding." Caleb flinched, his hands gripping the shelf. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know it would go this far. I was trying to keep things calm, but I messed up. I should have stood up for you." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the hurt was still raw. "I need more than sorry, Caleb," he said. "I need you to be my brother. Not just when it's easy." Caleb nodded, tears in his eyes. "I want to fix this," he said. "Tell me how." Ethan didn't have an answer. Not yet. But for the first time, he felt like Caleb was trying. Really trying. They talked for an hour. Not just about the notes, but about everything: their childhood, their parents, the wedge that had grown between them. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. That evening, Ethan and Lucas sat by the river, the same place where their love had taken root. Ethan told Lucas about his talk with Caleb, about the fragile hope he felt. "I don't know if I can leave," he said. "Not yet. But I know I want a life with you, Lucas. Wherever that is." Lucas smiled, his eyes shining. "That's enough for now," he said. We'll figure out the rest together. But the peace didn't last. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the shop to find the windows smashed, glass glittering on the pavement. Spray painted across the door were the words, "Get out." Ethan's heart sank, not just for the damage, but for what it meant. Someone in Willow Creek wanted him gone, and they weren't stopping at notes. Lucas arrived minutes later, his face paling at the sight. "We're calling the police," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "This ends now." Ethan nodded, but as they waited for the sheriff, he felt the weight of the town's hatred pressing down. He thought of Philadelphia, of a life where he and Lucas could be free. But he also thought of Caleb, of Sarah, of the people who'd stood up at the town hall. Could he leave them behind? Or was there still something worth fighting for in Willow Creek? The sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Wheeler who'd known Ethan since he was a kid, surveyed the shattered windows with a frown. "This is a damn shame, Ethan," he said, scribbling notes. "Any idea who'd do this?" Ethan shook his head, the spray-painted words "Get out" burning into his mind. He didn't trust Tom to dig too deep. Willow Creek's law enforcement wasn't known for taking hate crimes seriously. "Just find them," Ethan said, his voice tight. Lucas stood beside him, his hand resting lightly on Ethan's back, a silent promise of support. After Tom left, promising to look into it, Lucas turned to Ethan. "We can't stay here," he said. "Not like this." Ethan wanted to argue, to cling to the life he'd built. But the broken glass at his feet told a different story. He thought of the notes, the whispers, the years of hiding. "I need time," he said finally. "Just give me a little time." Lucas nodded, but his eyes were heavy with worry. They spent the day cleaning up the shop, boarding up the windows, scrubbing away the paint. Neighbors stopped by, some to gawk, others to help. Mrs. Henderson brought coffee and donuts, her presence a quiet defiance of the town's darker side. "You're not alone, Ethan," she said, squeezing his arm. "Don't let them make you think you are." Her words stayed with Ethan, but so did the fear. That night, he and Lucas sat in their apartment, the boarded-up shop below a constant reminder of the threat. Ethan couldn't shake the image of the spray paint, the hatred scrawled in bold letters. "What if they don't stop?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "What if it gets worse?" Lucas took his hand, his grip firm. "Then we fight back," he said. "Not with violence, but with truth. We show them we're not going anywhere unless we choose to." The next day, Ethan made a decision. He called Sarah, asking her to meet him at the shop. When she arrived, her face was pale, her eyes still red from her fight with Caleb. "I heard about the vandalism," she said. "I'm so sorry, Ethan." "It's not your fault," he said, though part of him wondered if her family's influence had fueled this. "But I need your help. I want to hold a meeting, here at the shop. Not a town hall. Just people who care. People who want to make this place better." Sarah's eyes widened, but she nodded. "I'll help," she said. I'll talk to Caleb, too. He's struggling, but he wants to make things right. The meeting was set for the following evening. Ethan and Lucas spent the day preparing, hanging flyers around town, inviting anyone willing to listen. To Ethan's surprise, people showed up. Mrs. Henderson, a few teachers from Lucas's school, even a couple of guys from the church who'd stayed silent at the wedding. About 20 people crowded into the shop, standing among the tools and oil cans, their faces a mix of curiosity and caution. Ethan stood at the front, his heart pounding. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves. "This town's been my home my whole life. But it's also been a place where I've had to hide who I am. I'm done hiding. I'm gay, and I love Lucas, and I'm not ashamed of that." The room was silent, but it wasn't the hostile silence Ethan had feared. Lucas stood beside him, his presence a steady warmth. "We're not asking for your approval," Lucas added. "We're asking for your respect, for a chance to live without fear." Mrs. Henderson spoke first, her voice clear. "I've lived here 60 years, she said, "and I'm ashamed it's taken this long for us to have this conversation. Ethan, Lucas, you have my support." Others chimed in, some hesitantly, others with conviction. A teacher named Rachel shared her own story of coming out to her family, her voice shaking but strong. A man from the church admitted he'd been wrong to stay silent. Not everyone agreed. Some left early, their faces closed off, but Ethan felt a shift, a crack in Willow Creek's armor. Caleb arrived late, standing at the back with Sarah. He didn't speak, but his presence was enough. After the meeting, he approached Ethan, his eyes downcast. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice rough. "I don't know if I can fix what I broke, but I want to try." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "That's all I've ever wanted," he said. That night, Ethan and Lucas lay in bed, the weight of the day settling around them. "I think we can stay," Ethan said, his voice soft. "Not forever. Maybe. But for now. There's something worth fighting for here." Lucas smiled, pulling him close. "Then we fight," he said. "Together." The weeks that followed were a delicate balance of hope and tension. The meeting at the shop had sparked something in Willow Creek, a quiet movement of people who wanted change, who saw Ethan and Lucas not as threats, but as neighbors. But the hate didn't vanish. Notes still appeared, though less frequently, and the sheriff's investigation stalled, with no leads on the vandalism. Ethan and Lucas learned to live with the unease, their love a shield against the town's lingering prejudice. Caleb became a regular visitor, stopping by the shop to talk, to listen. He was still clumsy with his apologies, still grappling with the weight of his choices. But he was trying. Sarah, too, became an ally, organizing a small group at the church to discuss inclusion, challenging the pastor's silence. It wasn't a revolution, but it was a start. One evening, as winter settled over Willow Creek, Ethan and Lucas sat on their bench by the river, wrapped in coats against the cold. The water was still, reflecting the stars, and for the first time in months, Ethan felt at peace. I've been thinking about Philadelphia, he said, his voice quiet. Not now, but someday. A place where we can start fresh. Lucas turned to him, his eyes bright. I'd like that, he said. But I'm happy here, too, as long as I'm with you. Ethan smiled, his heart full. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box he'd been carrying for weeks. Inside was a simple silver ring. Nothing fancy, but it held a promise. Lucas Bennett, he said, his voice trembling. Will you marry me? Lucas's eyes widened, then softened, tears spilling over. Yes, he whispered, pulling Ethan into a kiss that felt like a vow. The ring slid onto Lucas's finger, a quiet defiance of the town's judgment, a declaration of their love. The next day, Ethan told Caleb. His brother's face lit up, a genuine smile breaking through the guilt. I want to be there, Caleb said. When you get married, I want to be your best man. Ethan nodded, his eyes wet. I'd like that, he said. The engagement wasn't a secret for long. Word spread, and while some in Willow Creek turned away, others embraced it. Mrs. Henderson baked them a cake. Rachel offered to help plan, and even the pastor, after a long conversation with Sarah, agreed to meet with them. It wasn't acceptance from everyone, but it was enough. Months later, Ethan and Lucas stood in a small clearing by the river, surrounded by the people who'd chosen love over fear. Caleb was there, standing proudly as best man, Sarah at his side. The ceremony was simple, just vows and rings and the sound of the river. But it was everything. As Ethan said, I do, he looked at Lucas, at the man who'd taught him to fight for himself, and knew they'd won something greater than Willow Creek's approval feed won each other. The town would never be perfect. There would always be whispers, always be notes. But as Ethan and Lucas danced under the stars, their hands intertwined, Ethan realized the truth. Love wasn't just worth fighting for, it was worth everything. And in that moment, with Lucas by his side and his brother's smile across the clearing, Ethan knew they'd found their home. Not in a place, but in each other.